You know, there's a very specific feeling you get when you look at a really well-made executive summary. You know the kind I mean.
Yeah.
Clean fonts, bold headers, and there's always that chart that goes up and to the right. It just feels safe.
It feels certain.
Exactly. It feels like someone has done all the hard work, tamed the chaos, and just handed you the plan. We crave that certainty.
Oh, absolutely. It's the allure of the decimal point.
Right.
You know, if I tell you AI is going to change things, you just kind of nod.
Right.
But if I tell you AI will add $4.4 trillion to the global economy, suddenly I have your attention. That number,
Yeah.
it feels real, like something you can bank on.
And that specific number, 4.4 trillion, it comes from one of the most influential documents of 2023, McKinsey and Company's report on generative AI.
That was the report that launched 1,000 board meetings. For sure.
It really was. But today, we are not here to praise McKinsey's math. We're not even really here to critique it in the usual way. We're doing something, well, much stranger.
We're looking at a new piece of research that treats that report not as a business document, but as a thermodynamic system.
Which sounds like something you'd do to a nuclear reactor, not a PDF.
Right. The paper's called The Mirage of Certainty by Erickson Katz. And he didn't just fact-check the report. He performed what he calls a thermodynamic audit.
Okay, so this is where it gets fascinating. Katz argues that knowledge behaves like energy. In physics, there's entropy systems lose order, energy dissipates. He's saying the exact same thing happens to truth as it moves from the raw data all the way up the corporate ladder.
Yeah, think about that old game of telephone.
Oh, yeah.
You start with a complex sentence, and by the time it gets to the last person, it's shorter, it's funnier, and it's almost always wrong. Katz is just formalizing that. As information travels from the analyst to the writer to the executive summary, it undergoes compression.
Like an MP3 file. You strip out the data you think people won't hear to make the file smaller.
That is the perfect analogy. And you compress it to make it quotable, catchy. But if you compress it too much, you get artifacts. You know, the sound gets teeny.
The image gets all pixelated.
Exactly. And Katz's whole argument is that modern business reports are a kind of lossy compression. They strip away all the ifs, the buts, and the maybes to create this clean, confident story. The result looks crisp, but structurally, it's full of holes. It has high entropy.
And Katz decided to actually test the structural integrity of this report using a really novel method. He built a 5-node distributed governance system.
This is the part that really hooked me. He essentially built a tribunal of AI agents to put the report on trial.
Let's break this down, because the cast of characters here really matters. It wasn't just, ask ChatGPT what it thinks.
Not at all. He assigned specific personas and rule books to different AIs. So first you have Raider C, which was powered by Claude.
Okay.
And Katz gave Claude the full thermodynamic rulebook. He trained it on the audit's methodology. So think of Claude as the structural engineer.
It's the one tapping the walls looking for the load-bearing beams.
Precisely. It doesn't care if the paint is pretty. It cares if the building's going to fall down.
Okay, so that's Claude, the expert. Then you had Raider G and Raider D Gemini and DeepSeek.
And these are the naive audience. And when we say naive, it doesn't mean unintelligent. It just means they weren't given the specific audit framework.
So they're us. They're the target audience, the executives, the journalists.
Exactly. They're walking into the building going, wow, look at these high ceilings. What a view. They're reacting to the rhetoric, the confidence of the text.
They're just vibing with it.
They're absolutely vibing. Then you have the consolidator, ChatGPT, whose only job was to merge these opinions. And finally, the most critical piece, the human anchor, Katz himself.
Right. We'll get to the human's role in a bit, because that's a whole other can of worms. But first, what did this machine tribunal actually find?
Well, they ran the McKinsey report through this whole system, and the results were, they were not great for McKinsey.
I'm sensing some bad grades.
Oh, yeah. The audit used a framework called KTRPS. It's a mouthful, but it basically measures 3 things: argumentative integrity, scientific integrity, and thermodynamic integrity.
All right, let's start with argumentative integrity. What was the score?
It was 0.405 out of 1.
Oof. That's a failing grade in anyone's book.
It is. The system classified it as fragile integrity. The core problem is what Katz calls rhetorical architecture. The report loves building these massive skyscrapers on top of very, very shaky foundations.
How so?
It takes a conditional estimate. Something like labor productivity could rise if adoption hits 100%, and by the time that data point makes it to the headline, the if has just vanished. The conditional becomes a declarative.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't that just consulting? I mean, they're not a university, they're a business selling a vision.
That's the million-dollar question, and Katz addresses it directly. His argument is that if you are using the aesthetics of science, the charts, the data tables, the precise figures like 4.4 trillion, then you are claiming the authority of science.
Ah, I see.
You're telling the market, this isn't a hunch, this is a calculation. And if you borrow the authority of the lab coat, you have to adhere to the rigor of the lab. You can't have it both ways.
You can't wear the lab coat to sell used cars.
Precisely. And that leads right into the second score. Scientific integrity. This one was a bit higher, 0.604, classified as stable with conceptual drift.
Conceptual drift? Sounds like a bad prog rock band. What does it mean here?
It means the tools they used didn't match the thing they were measuring. The report relies heavily on capability frameworks from 2017 to measure the potential of generative AI in 2023.
Wait, 2017? In AI years, that's the Stone Age. That's before GPT-2, let alone GPT-4.
Exactly. They're using old world rulers to measure new world territory. It's like trying to map the internet using a guide to telegraph lines. The methodology is technically scientific, they ran the numbers, but the benchmarks were just obsolete.
So the math works, but the variables are all ghosts.
And that leads to the harshest finding of all. Knowledge, thermodynamic integrity. The score there was 0.380, a total KT failure.
And this is that energy loss metric, the entropy.
Yes. The report generates what he calls high-load knowledge. It makes these huge, world-altering claims. Trillions of dollars, workforce transformation. That is a heavy load. But the report has almost no dissipation controls. It has no mechanisms to manage all that uncertainty. It just keeps piling on the weight.
There's a specific example in the audit that I think really grounds this, the labor redeployment assumption. This felt like the smoking gun to me.
It absolutely is. It's the load-bearing pillar of that entire $4.4 trillion claim.
And what is the assumption?
The report just assumes that as AI automates jobs, the people who lose those jobs will essentially instantly find new work at the same or even higher productivity level.
Which is, let's say, optimistic.
It's historically illiterate. I mean, look at the Rust Belt. Look at any major automation shift. Redeployment is slow, it's painful, and it's often incomplete. It takes a generation. But McKinsey's model just treats frictionless redeployment as a given.
So if that one single assumption is wrong, if the accountant replaced by AI doesn't immediately become a robot psychologist,
then the 4.4 trillion number doesn't just get a bit smaller. It evaporates. The entire GDP growth they promise depends on those people working.
But that assumption is buried deep in the footnotes somewhere, I'm guessing.
Of course. The executive summary presents the growth as a near certainty, and it completely hides the fact that it all relies on a near miracle happening in the labor markets.
That's the compression right there. The if got compressed out of the MP3, and we're just left with the catchy hook.
And the catchy hook works. Which brings us to the most ironic, the most meta-finding of the whole audit, something called the heuristic amplification signal.
Okay, this is where the naive raters Gemini and DeepSeek come back into the story.
Right. Remember, they represent the smart but non-expert reader. When Katz compared the scores, he found something really disturbing. The naive AIs consistently scored the McKinsey report higher than the expert AI and the human anchor.
So the ones that didn't know the rules loved it.
They loved it. They gave it high marks for clarity, for persuasiveness, for impact. They were just dazzled by the rhetoric. And Katz argues this is proof of the report's failure, not its success.
How so?
It proves the report is designed to trigger our heuristics, our mental shortcuts. It looks professional, it sounds confident, it uses big numbers, so we just assume it's true.
It's like the rhetorical equivalent of a guy in a high-vis vest carrying a ladder. You just let him into the building because he looks like he belongs there.
That's a perfect image. The naive AIs open the door wide. They mistook confidence for competence. And that is heuristic amplification.
There's no better example of this than that 2045 date. The report predicts automation will hit a midpoint around the year 2045, not the mid-century. 2045.
It sounds so precise, doesn't it? But where did that date come from? They surveyed experts, but the key is when they surveyed them.
Early 2023.
Peak hype. ChatGPT had just exploded onto the scene. Every influencer was saying AGI was 6 months away. The data they collected was really just a measurement of the panic and excitement of that one specific moment.
It was a mood ring.
It was a mood ring, and McKinsey took that mood, averaged it out, and turned it into a calendar date. But if they'd run that survey in 2021, the date might have been 2060. The report just locks in that one emotional snapshot.
And then companies start building 5-year plans based on 2045 because it was in a McKinsey report. It becomes a self-reinforcing mirage.
That is the danger. It's not that the number is definitely wrong. Who knows? Maybe it'll be 2045. But the certainty is totally unearned. It's false precision.
Okay, so we have a report that is structurally fragile and thermodynamically failing, and yet the naive AIs thought it was great. This brings us to the final piece of the experiment, the human anchor. Why did Katz have to step in?
This is the principle of PHA. The probability of human necessity is greater than 0.
Meaning you can't just automate truth-checking.
You can't. Katz found that the consolidator ChatGPT, it failed at its job. It tried to be polite and tried to smooth over the massive difference between the expert rater who hated the report and the naive raters who loved it. It just wanted to find a middle ground.
It regressed to the mean. It didn't want to rock the boat.
Exactly. It couldn't handle the conflict between this looks good and this is structurally unsound. So Katz, the human anchor, had to intervene. He reviewed the structural flaws, that labor assumption, the hype cycle data, and he manually overrode the score. He's the one who marked it as a failure at 0.3A0.
He had to be the adult in the room.
He had to perform thermodynamic work. That's the key phrase. Maintaining truth requires energy. Entropy is the natural state of things. Systems naturally slide into easy, pleasant falsehoods. Keeping them true requires actual effort.
And the AI just took the path of least resistance.
Right. The human had to exert force to say, no, wait, this is actually broken. It's a profound point. We think of AI as this objective machine, but here, the AI was the one falling for the rhetoric, and the human had to supply the critical thinking.
So what's the takeaway for us? I mean, most of us aren't auditing McKinsey reports with a team of robots. We're just trying to figure out what's going on.
I think it's that we live in an ecosystem of what Katz calls high-load knowledge artifacts. We are constantly bombarded with reports and threads that claim to know the future. And they all use the same tricks: compression, confidence, the aesthetics of science.
And we are all naturally the naive raters, aren't we? We want to believe the chart that goes up and to the right.
We do. We crave that certainty. It feels good. But the lesson of this deep dive is that when you feel that sense of comfort, when a number makes you feel like the future is settled, that is the exact moment you should be most suspicious.
You need to stop looking at the pretty paint and start tapping on the walls.
You have to ask,
Yeah.
what was compressed to make this sound so simple? What ifs were cut out to make this headline? And who is the human anchor making sure this whole thing doesn't just drift into fantasy?
It really redefines what it means to be well-informed. It's not about knowing the numbers. It's about knowing the architecture of the numbers.
And recognizing that sometimes the most honest answer is just, we don't know, even if that doesn't look very good on a slide.
So here's the question we want to leave you with today. The next time you see a bold prediction about the stock market or technology or anything, ask yourself, are you seeing the truth? Or are you just experiencing heuristic amplification?
Are you the inspector, or are you just the tourist admiring the view?
I think I'm going to be knocking on a few more walls from now on. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Stay skeptical.
And keep the entropy low. Goodbye.